I wanted to do a short video on predator versus prey vision and as they relate to first and third person in video games. This came from a kind of a surprise visit to the doctor. When I was going to the eye doctor, I have very bad eyesight, and he was talking about LASIK, and I was curious about LASIK. What he was talking about was who is a good candidate and who's a bad candidate. And so here we can imagine is our focal vision, and then out here is more sort of peripheral, right? And then out to the edges is like, out to the edges of our peripheral vision. And the fascinating thing that he told me was that LASIK works by abrading the outside of the coating of the eye, to force a reshape of the eye so it'll focus, right? Instead of using corrective lenses. And the fascinating things he said was my eyesight was so bad that in order to correct my eyesight up to, having 20/20 vision, it would actually fundamentally alter my vision, which is to say, the red here is very focal vision. He said that it would actually end up reducing, not this is not to scale, but it would end up reducing this focal vision, and it would sort of strengthen, because it's like, if you bend the lens, you change the optics performance of it. It would change some of those performance characteristics, which I thought was fascinating. But that got me thinking. What are we what are we looking at when we talk about predator versus prey vision, right? What do humans have, right? They've got accurate human. They've got eyes in the front of their head, right? A hawk. This is a very accurate hawk, right? Have eyes. Owls, especially, right? Hoo-hoo. Have eyes. Cats. Predator primarily. Predators have eyes at the front of their head, whereas now we're really gonna do it. Dogs. This is a horse question mark. All right. This was not meant to be a stream about or a video about me drawing animals. Oh, look, I kind of salvaged it. Horse. It's not meant to be my drawing stream for animals I don't know how to draw offhand. But the idea here is, or a fish, right? The idea here is the more you have totally accurate fish, very good fish, and a very good horse. This is some of my best work ever. The more you are a prey animal, the more you're pushing the eyes, out, right? For a horse or a cow, it is no point in focusing directly in front of you, or a fish, right? There's really no point. That the important thing is to scan for threats. And so you have eyes that have relatively poor focal vision, but can encompass more and more of a periphery. A horse can basically see behind themselves, right? With a slight twist of the neck, let's go above. This will be really good. I'm a horse. Their eyes can, basically see pretty well around them, and then so a slight turn of their head, and you can see pretty well behind you. That's a great thing for a prey animal. What does all this have to do with video games? The breakthrough for me was realizing a lot of the discomfort you get from some game players from playing in first-person shooters, right? And why I think, frankly, some of your huge breakthroughs in shooters weren't making them more cartoony, although that helped for a broad access, broad accessibility. Wasn't making them cartoony, wasn't making them safer, this, that, and the other, although some of those other aspects are really helpful. Part of it is that when you've got this, right, something you have to understand is when, that's why the old fashioned, PC player versus console player. The console player, here I am, I'm playing on my console, and here's my TV over here. For that to be comfortable, we can just think about your eyes, and so the TV is the your quote unquote window to the world, right? And it stands to reason that a PC player, when their window to the world is right up next to their face, that makes sense to have the FOV, right? The field of view should be wider because your display is closer up. Whereas if you're sitting back from your display on a couch, the FOV makes sense. It makes sense that you want to first lessen distortion, but it would make sense to match the field of view by pushing it back. So, a common one is more like, 70. I mean, some of the older ones went as low as 60, whereas the standard for a PC game was much closer to 90 for a long time. I'm not sure if it still is now. They've kind of, cross-platform games have really split the difference a lot. But to go back to this, so when we're playing a first-person shooter, not only does the FOV trick, come into play, but even with a wider FOV, unless you really push it like Aliens versus Predator and get this crazy sort of fish lens effect, you have a very narrow field of view, comparatively speaking. I'm over here, like this is just now in my periphery, but even though I can't tell what that is, it's my hand, for those playing at home, I can't tell what that is, but I can still see the motion, right? In a game, we have none of that, right? We're constantly, blinkered, to about here, and yet we have great focal vision. We have a great predator vision of saying, okay, I may have blinkers, but I can see very good right in front of me. However, that means I have to make up for my real loss in situational awareness, right? The other senses that are not available. I have to scan a lot for my prey. But this is one of the best ways in gaming to really make this an engaging time is the first person. But it's at a cost, right? And so I think you know where I'm going with this, is that contrasting the first person perspective, which is like apex predator, you're a cat, you're a hawk, you have great focus, especially with what happens when you aim down sights in these games. It tightens up the field of view even better. So sorry, I know I interrupted my own thought there earlier, but think about some of these games that the real breakthrough in shooters, I feel like, in their mass popularity, were a lot of different functions, but wow, great pants. A lot of different features and functions and aspects, but third person became the rule, partly because what you're effectively doing is when you pull back the camera, you give the player more peripheral vision, right? Matt, so if we were to map, right, this first person view into like the screen real estate of the third person view, it might come to something more like this, right? Maybe not. Maybe it's better, but it's less. However, of course, we've got this really nice extra consideration. We get a couple of things back. We get the sense of proprioception, which is our awareness of where our body is in space. We're disconnected. We're sort of discombobulated when we're in first-person perspective, unless we're in VR. VR is really nice for that. We can use our own body, and we know where our own body is, and so we can use our own actual proprioception. Whereas in third person, you have this stand-in for proprioception because I can see my character in front of me. So I know more things about, like, old Call of Duties used to have, the little, and I'm sure some of them still do, right? The little crouchy mans to show you what your body was doing. And it's like, well, I should know that, or I should remember that, but sometimes you don't, especially if it's a toggle key. But it's very interesting to me that a huge number of these really big games went third person because, to me, this is more comfortable for most people, right? In order for you to keep overall situational awareness, especially for threats in this view, you have to actively scan. You have to actively scan. You have to actively attend to your environment in a way that you don't have to do quite so hard for a third-person shooter, right? It's not 100%, but it's much more. This one is this one's predator vision with first person, and then a third person or further out is more of an overview, a sort of emulates the way a prey animal sees the world. So, and we're we're subject to our own weird biology and evolutionary makeup. We have both aspects to humanity, right? We have been both predators and we have been prey at some point in our past. And so I think there's a low level discomfort that can come, that sometimes, like, this can be very intense. And that's a lot of the value, right? Doom really kind of ushered in the first person shooter in a real way. And it has ushered these very in your face kinds of experiences, and the revamp, I think, wisely front loaded, this notion of being very literally in your face. But the bigger the games, not exclusively, this is not a hard and fast rule, but the bigger games that are now, like Fortnite and PUBG, although I know PUBG for the more competitive set has a dedicated first person only mode, which brings us back over here for the real killers. But for everyone else, I think it's really interesting that this maps to ways of seeing the world that we see in nature. And I've thought about that for years, and I wanted to share that with you. So thank you again for your comments and suggestions. I will try and answer the rest of them that I've received in the last day or two. Thank you for watching.